Today's episode is being brought to you by Untarnished, Reclaiming My Self-Worth Through God's Untainted Love. Untarnished is a compelling memoir and simple self-help guide where I give you the inside scoop on my personal journey and provide coping strategies to help others heal from their past. You can download a free copy of the first chapter by heading over to donnacherie.com/untarnished. You're listening to Untarnished Moments, the podcast that helps you shine through life challenges and move past self-defeat into victory. I'm your host, Donna Cherie. Let's get into today's show. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Untarnished Moments. If this is your first time listening to the show, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the other episodes that I have available. There's a variety of topics that we discuss, but at the end of the day, we're talking about moving from self-defeat into victory, and that we don't have to let our past hinder us from moving forward and living our best lives. So today I have a very special guest. Her name is Kristen Secor. She is the owner of a travel business that she's going to share with us today and about her journey. So, welcome to the show, Kristen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, you have your own traveling business to where you are traveling and kind of just exploring the world. How did you get started with that?
So, it's a wheelchair accessible travel blog. Prior to that, I was a mental health counselor for 11 years. I absolutely loved my job, but my health changed. I was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy, and that basically affects my strength, my balance, my mobility, and my endurance, and also my breathing. So I'm on a ventilator full time, and I use a wheelchair. Excuse me. I use a wheelchair whenever I travel. And so one of the ways I had kind of found purpose in my life was through helping others. And that's how I started in the mental health business, is just giving back and using my own challenges and life experience as a way to help others when they were at their lowest points. And then in 2017, my health took a turn for the worse. I got really sick with pneumonia. My lung collapsed. I was in the hospital for about 6 weeks. They weren't sure if I was going to survive. And when I got discharged from the hospital, the doctors felt like my health was not well enough to return to my job as a counselor. And so I took a few years off, really trying to decide what's my new purpose. What am I going to do? How can I, find that joy in life again? And so I decided to combine two of the things that I love the most, which is helping other people as well as travel. I've always traveled, and it's been a big passion of my life. I'm the person that all my friends come to with travel, for travel advice and stuff. So I thought, now that my health has deteriorated, I'm using a wheelchair more often than what I once did. I thought, what? I could really give back because there's not a lot of information about accessible travel, the places you can go or what it's like. So that's how I started my website, is I wanted to inspire people who had physical disabilities to travel to places that they may not have thought was possible. But I also wanted to give the resources to make that travel easier, and I wanted to advocate for more accessible travel experiences in the world.
That's awesome. When you were doing your research, what exactly were you looking for? And when it comes to having accessibility or accessible travel, what are some things that you look for with that?
So I look for what the hotels offer. Do they have fully accessible rooms? Are they truly fully accessible? Because that word accessible gets thrown around a lot, and it doesn't always mean it doesn't always have a universal definition across countries, across continents. So I look at whether something's truly accessible or is it meet accessibility standards but may not be functional. I also look for accessible transportation. So once you're in a new place, how are you going to get around? Is it possible? Do sidewalks have curb cuts so that people in wheelchairs can easily get from one sidewalk to another? Is there accessible public transportation? Are there tours available that can accommodate people with mobility issues? What are the sites that you can see? What is the overall experience as far as people's perception of disability? Because that can change across cultures as well. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the world that just think, accessibility, that disabilities, if you wanted it bad enough, you could just get over whatever your challenges were, or that special requirements are not necessary. Why are you so special? And unfortunately, that's just very ableistic comments, that it's not that we want special treatment, we just want the same opportunities that everyone else has in the world.
Absolutely. So, since you've started your business, how many places have you traveled to thus far, and where are you headed?
So, since I traveled the business probably less, over my lifetime, I've been to 20 different countries and 4 different continents.
Wow. And what's been your favorite place thus far, if you have one?
There's so many places that are special. I really enjoyed Italy. I just got back from a trip to Antarctica, and Antarctica was absolutely incredible. So I try to find my mindset is I try to find something special about each trip. Every trip is going to have their own unique challenges when it comes to accessibility and just in general, travel in general. But I always look to find something really unique and special about each trip I go on.
Okay. And do you always bring something back with you?
I
Or
always take lots of photos. Sometimes I get a souvenir, not often. Usually when I do get a souvenir, it's usually a Christmas ornament for my tree to kind of remind me of, where I've been.
okay. That's awesome. Seems so much fun, and I'm glad that you created this because it is a need, and for more people to know that you can still travel even if you do have some physical disabilities or some type of limitations, you can still go out and experience the world. So I definitely
Yeah,
commend.
absolutely. I mean, that, like I said before, that's one of my goals is there's a lot of people with disabilities that want to travel. There's a lot of fear about traveling with a disability, especially airline travel, because they fear what if their mobility equipment gets damaged, which
Hmm.
unfortunately is a very real concern and a real thing that happens on a regular basis, where airlines will damage a wheelchair, and especially if it's a custom wheelchair, I mean, you're taking someone's independence away. And in essential, their wheelchair is their legs. That's how they become independent. That's how they function. So to take that away because it's damaged, and it can sometimes take months to repair, that's a really big fear for a lot of people. And a lot of people just make assumptions that something's not going to be accessible because it's not like a first world country or if it's not a city. One of the things I love to do is actually go out into nature. Nature and accessibility don't always go hand in hand, but they can. And a lot of times they do in places like national parks and things like that. So I really like to show my readers that there's more possible than what you may think, and this is how you can do it.
Yeah, and one of the things too I find interesting, I was looking at your blog earlier this week and there was a picture of you. I'm not sure, I think you were at a national park or somewhere, but the wheelchair that you had, I mean, it's so brilliant and so unique and I loved it. But it didn't necessarily had wheels. I don't know what you call it, but it had where it could endure where you were, like the rugged terrains and stuff. Like it was a really cool looking chair, if I could say that. But
Yeah, I know what when you're talking about. It's called a
yeah.
trash chair. So they're like tank wheels, so they're not really wheels, they're tracks like a tank would use to go over lots of different terrain. And that was probably one of the most freeing experiences I've ever had. I wish more places had those available. The place that you're referring to, I was in Michigan at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, and they had these free for people to use, and you could go over this trail that never would have been accessible in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter because of the inclines and the slopes and things. But it was so freeing to be able to do something that I hadn't been able to do in so long. And I was just doing it a little differently. And it was so empowering and just a fantastic experience. I wish more places had those.
Absolutely. Shout out to that organization who has that consciousness of mind to think of all people and to be able to offer that as a service. And I hope that they could be kind of trailblazer in helping other places, national parks do the same so that all people can enjoy nature and what's out there. So that's cool. Throughout your life, you've had some challenges because of being born with a medical issue or having some physical limitations, but you've been able to accomplish a lot of things. You said in the beginning that you had a practically a career for 11 years as a licensed mental health counselor. You were able to get your degrees and now you're traveling. But during this process, how has having a disability affected your self esteem and confidence? And how did you, press on and still go after your dreams and goals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I was born in the 1980s, and during that time, the how society approached people with disabilities was really kind of a very segregation kind of situation where if you were born with a disability, the initial thought was, I'm going to put you in a home because you're not going to have a normal life. And, that's just how they approached it. Luckily, I had a very supportive family that said, no, that's not going to happen. So, what happens is you kind of take society's view and you internalize it. So, you always feel a little different, and you're just fighting to blend in because you don't want to be segregated. I always thought of myself as normal. I just had problems getting around. So, so my whole goal when I was growing up was kind of just to blend in, not really show my unique personality. Um, so it took me many, many years to be able to be comfortable in who I was and being comfortable um, being different because that was always seen as kind of a negative thing. So it was really probably while I was as a mental health counselor that I started embracing my differences and really seeing them as a strength rather than a weakness. Because when you're different, you have a unique perspective on life. You have so many other things to offer that maybe other people don't. But when you grow up kind of being told that that's a negative thing, you internalize that. So it was really through the support of family and friends and really taking my own risks and really self-reflecting that I started embracing that and started being more comfortable in who I was and how I could really use that in order to help other people and not see it as such a negative thing.
Yeah, and that's great. And I'm just curious as well, when you had your job, what was that interview like for you and how were you received? when you went for your interview for your job to become a
Yeah.
licensed mental health counselor?
So, in the United States, when you interview for a job, they are not allowed to ask about your disability, even if it's visible. They can't ask you, are you disabled or what type of disability you have. So, even like mine's more visible because I walk different, I have a different gait and stuff like that. So, it was obvious that I was disabled, but that's not something that they're allowed to ask about. Luckily, I was interviewed by a team, so all of the other people in the counseling department, there were four other people. They all interviewed me as a group to really get a sense of, whether I would fit in well, whether our personalities would match and things like that. So they never asked about my disability because of the law, but they obviously knew that I was. And luckily, they saw that as a strength. I saw that as a unique perspective that I could bring to the table and relate more to, maybe our clients, because we were working in an inpatient facility. So that means um, we saw people at their lowest. We had people that were so anxious they couldn't function, or they were depressed and suicidal, or just really going through a really tough transition in their life. And so, luckily, my coworkers saw that as, you've had your own challenges. What great personal experience you can bring to the table when you're helping other people.
Now that you're still forging ahead and inspiring others through your travel blog and things of that nature. So, do you have any plans when it comes to where you're headed next for travel?
I have big plans. So my goals, I've been to four continents already. My goal is to visit all seven by the end of 2026. That's my goal. Next year I'll be going to Africa, and really looking at accessibility there and the companies that work there. I know there are several countries within Africa that offer fully wheelchair accessible safaris. Um, there's in Rwanda and Uganda, they offer accessible gorilla tracks. So those are on my bucket list for next year, and I'm actually looking to expand my travel blog into offering small group tours for people with mobility difficulties. One of the challenges in accessible travel is the cost of it. If you compare accessible travel to traditional travel, the cost is at least twice as much, oftentimes more, because you're needing to do private tours and things like that. While there are some companies in the world that will offer, group tours and stuff, a lot of the ways people travel with mobility issues is through um, private companies where it's just your group traveling. And so that cost really adds up. There's a lot of people that would love to travel more if it was more affordable. So one of my goals is to one, take the stress out of planning accessible travel. If I can help do that and say, hey, there's this tour and it's, going to be fully accessible, and here's what the hotels are going to look like, and you're going to have accessible bathrooms and transportation, and you can do all these amazing activities. That's a huge weight off of someone, to have to go through that planning process. But then if we do it as a group, it often becomes more affordable because you're not just doing that private tour, you're sharing it with other people that know exactly what the challenges are of accessible travel. And it's a way to build a community and camaraderie and just have an amazing experience.
I love that. It's so beautiful. And I'm sure that you'll accomplish all your goals. Seems like you're doing so great and having so much fun. I'm cheering you on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And if someone wanted to get started with accessible traveling, what would they need to do?
So planning in advance is a huge thing. There are limited accessible rooms at hotels or on cruise ships. So the earlier you can start planning your trip, the better, because that's going to give you more options. Um, Additionally, you're going to need that time just to do that research of what are the sidewalks like, what is the transportation like, and what do I want to see? How do I want to get around? Travel blogs like mine help with that. I write about places that I personally have been to, and I try to take as many pictures of surfaces and inclines and things that may not be Instagram worthy, but are going to be helpful in, for the reader to decide whether they can do that or not, because they know their abilities better than anyone else. So if they see an incline and they say, oh, I can do that, I know my mobility equipment can handle that, or they may see it and say, oh, wow, that's too steep, I'm not comfortable with that, I'm gonna have to, find a different place to attraction to see during my trip, or to find out what else I can do. Um, that whole planning process takes the longest, because I find for myself, I need a plan A, B, and C, because as most travelers know, things can and do go wrong when you travel, no matter whether you're able-bodied, whether you're a person with a disability. Things don't always work out as planned. So having those plans, knowing the resources that you can turn to. So if your wheelchair breaks during your trip, is there a repair shop nearby that you can, get parts or service? Is there, you know, if you had planned on taking a public bus and it turns out their accessible bus is broken and in the shop, okay, so how else are you going to get around? Having those different plans will help take the stress off when things do go wrong during travel, because they will. And it's more about just, I think, really knowing what all your resources are, what your options are, so that when things go awry, you have the confidence to say, okay, now I'm going to go to plan B. I know what plan B is. And if that doesn't work out, I have a plan C. And I'm going to, really still have a great trip, even if things go wrong.
Would you recommend that somebody actually like call the various hotels, or can they just email, or look on Expedia, or is there a specific website that they could use?
So a lot of the hotel booking websites, a lot of it comes down to hotel brand. So what I have found is that there are some hotel brands that allow you to book a specific type of room, like a wheelchair accessible room. And those are the hotels you're going to want to stick to. And that I know Hilton does that. Um, and I would always, after you book, no matter how you book, whether it's through Expedia or directly with a hotel, I always follow up with an email and or a phone call to make sure that they understand the type of room that you need, that it is available. If possible, I recommend that um, giving you a specific room number, because I've had situations where I've booked with, let's say, Marriott, and I thought I booked a hotel, wheelchair accessible room. I even, called to confirm, yes, you have an accessible room. I show up and they give me a hearing accessible room and not a wheelchair accessible room. And then they say, well, that's all we have. And I said, well, no, I booked this specific type of room with this specific type of bathroom. And they said, well, we never got that message. Or, we upgraded someone else to that room, someone else is occupying it. And so you really have to be an advocate for yourself, to know what your rights are. And if you book that type of room, ask to speak with a manager. Be very polite about it, because you're always going to get further when you're sweeter versus if you're, sour. But be firm, and this is what my needs are. This is what I booked. These are the steps I took. So what's the problem and how can we resolve it? Can you check to see that the person in that room really needs that type of room? Because sometimes, especially with the loyalty programs, they'll upgrade someone in their program to an accessible room, even though they don't need it because it's a larger room or it's considered nicer or something like that. So really be an advocate for yourself. Really look at what kind of detail you can get. If you don't see pictures on a website before you book, I would reach out to the hotel before you even make a reservation to ask about, will their rooms meet your needs? What's the height of the bed? What's the height of the toilet? Does it have grab bars? Is it a roll-in shower or does it have a step? Is there a fold-down bench in the shower for you to sit on? Is there enough room underneath the bed so that if you need a patient lift to get from your wheelchair to the bed, that there's enough room under the bed for that lift to go under there to transfer you? There's unfortunately, especially when you're traveling to other countries, the hotel may say it's accessible, but have no pictures whatsoever of what those rooms look like. So always reach out if you have questions or concerns, both before booking and after booking. Call to confirm after your booking. And I also call to confirm like a week or two before my trip so that I know that everything is consistent or supposed to be consistent. And if things don't work out, like I said, just advocate for yourself and know what your rights are in different countries, so that you can know what to ask for as part of a resolution to the problem.
That's good information. Do you by any chance have like a checklist for individuals to go over before they leave for their trip? Is
I
there
have
something
not
like that?
created one yet, but that's a fantastic idea. And that maybe something I work on very soon to offer my readers so that it makes it a little easier for them.
Yeah, I think that would
I
be
do have
great.
a trip planner that does a little bit of that. So I one of the things, if you sign up for my newsletter, which is free, and I give everyone weekly accessible travel tips. But I do have a trip planning template, and it's really kind of goes through a little bit of what you were talking about, of things you want to consider, and also it's a great place to have all of your trip information in one place. So to know what hotels I'm staying at or how I'm going to get from point A to point B, whether it's public transportation or a private driver you hire or, things like that. It also has room for like flight information and whether you've called the accessibility office at the airline to let them know that you'll be bringing your wheelchair with you and what your needs may be, at the airport, that kind of thing. But I might add a more condensed checklist to that trip planner. That sounds like a great idea.
Okay, cool. And where can people find your blog and also check you out on the web?
So I am on Facebook. I have a Facebook page called World on Wheels blog. I am also on Instagram at World on Wheels blog, and Twitter. And then my website is https://worldonwheelsblog.com.
Awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to check out Kristen. She has a wealth of information for accessibility travel. And even if it may not be able to help you directly, maybe it can help someone else in your family and share the information with others. I know I certainly will because in my day job, I work with a lot of different individuals, and so I'll definitely be sharing your blog and this information. And I think it's just so needed. So thank you so much for just coming on the show today to share your story, your expertise, and how you're traveling around the world. So
Well, thank
thank you
you
so
so much
much.
for having me. It was really an honor.
Of course. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you next week. Until then, ciao. Hey, Overcomers. Thanks for tuning in. For more information, head on over to donnacherie.com. If you want to find me online, I'm at I am Donna Cherie on Instagram and Donna Cherie on Facebook. Don't forget to join the Overcomers Confidence Club Facebook community. And of course, if you love the show, Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes.